How are we doing, Lucy? Have we got nearly everyone in?
Still letting a few people in.
For those of you who've joined us, we're just waiting for a few more people to arrive. We've got in the region about 90 people possibly turning up tonight, so we're just giving everyone a chance to arrive, and we plan to start just a couple of minutes after 6:30. Okay, I will make a start. Hopefully you can all hear me loud and clear. Hello, good evening and welcome. My name is Tanya St Pierre and I'm your compere for this evening. My role is Project Manager for Cumbria Wildlife Trust's Get Cumbria Buzzing project, who this week is hosting a week of activities and webinars as part of the Big Buzz Week to raise the profile of pollinators. Cumbria Wildlife Trust is the lead organisation for the project, which includes 11 partners whose logos you can see in the welcome slide in front of you. And everyone involved in the project is really excited that Erica McAlister is here tonight as our guest speaker. Get Cumbria Buzzing aims to promote pollinators working together with our partners. We are creating and restoring wildflower habitat across northwest Cumbria, mostly along main roads and public spaces. And this is specifically for pollinators. We're also delivering a range of public engagement events, working with schools, communities and volunteers to encourage and help them take action for pollinators. In addition to this, we're also working to create a pollinator atlas, which is a map that highlights pollinator populations, which Erica, I think, will be very pleased to hear, includes flies across Cumbria. The project is funded in part by Highways England and National Lottery Heritage Fund, amongst other funders. Now, the story behind this webinar tonight is that my colleague who's here with me now, Lucy, read Erica's book, The Secret Life of Flies. Now, Lucy simply couldn't stop raving about Erica's book and thought it was utterly fantastic. So as a result, we asked our conservation apprentice, Melanie, to get in contact with Erica to invite her here tonight. And the rest is history. Here she is. So we're delighted to have Erica, one of the most eminent authorities on Diptera, true flies, sharing her experiences within this webinar tonight. What I'll do, Erica, is I'll just give a bit of background, if that's okay with you, about yourself. So, Erica studied applied environmental biology at the University of Manchester in the early 90s. Whilst there, she was able to undertake 2 placements. The first was at the Institute of Terrestrial Biology, where she ran around catching heather beetles on the Dorset Heath and worked on their Dipteran parasites, followed by a placement at the University of Adelaide, where she worked on ant communities in the South Australian outback. Erica's doctorate was in wetland ecological entomology at the University of Roehampton. During her time there, she was researching this topic. She turned to the taxonomic expertise that was housed in the Natural History Museum in London and volunteered with a team after she'd completed her thesis. Okay, so after a period of lecturing in ecology, entomology and biostatistics, mostly at Roehampton, but also guest lecturing at a variety of other universities, Erica secured some contract work at the National History Museum, which led to a full-time job in the Diptera section in 2006. Okay, so Erica's research work is broad and varied and has included mosquito projects both in the UK and abroad. Hopefully I'll say this right, Acylidae in South Australia and bat flies and other Diptera from the Dominica. As well as working on flies, Erica is an avid promoter of museum collections in research and the development of novel methods for utilising old specimens for new research. Erica is also a guest lecturer on 2 different master courses and hosts numerous students in her department. So Erica is very much involved with public outreach also, and has appeared on TV, radio, including presenting the series Who's the Pest on Radio 4, numerous podcasts, as well as giving talks at science festivals, international nature fairs and wildlife organisations, where she promotes flies and the research undertaken at the museum. Erica is president of the Amateur Entomology Society in the UK and sits on the committee for the Dipterist Forum UK and the International Congress of Dipterology. In 2016, her first book, The Secret Life of Flies, was published, a popular science book introducing flies to a new age, which has received international acclaim across the globe. And this has been followed up by The Inside Out of Flies, published in 2020. I've not yet read this, and I really want to. So just quickly, before I hand over to Erica, before we start, if I can just ask that everyone keeps themselves muted with their speakers. There will be opportunity for question and answers at the end of the webinar. So please post questions in the chat box and we will run through them then. Okay, so without further ado, I shall hand over to Erica and I will stop sharing my slides.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, let's share screen. Okay, one moment. Oh, hello, can you see all that?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my shoppice. Usually I'm found in the Natural History Museum, but right now you're in my garden shed. Instead of this beautiful building that's been described as a temple to natural history. And it's amazing. There's at least 80 million specimens found behind the scenes. Very much, most of it is behind the scenes. Whereas most people think about it as bones and stones. Actually, the most important creatures that you'll find out are the flies, obviously. And we have arguably the most comprehensive collection of Diptera in the world. It is amazing. But there's still so much we don't know and so much to discover and so much to describe. And one of my roles is to run around the world and find new species. And this is great. But with flies, it's not often the nicest habitats at time. I have to say that imaging flies from some feces of very kind of nice cows in the Scilly Islands was quite cute. I've hoovered flies off pigs. That was in an urban farm in Hounslow. So it's not all glamorous. But then the top one is me in Ethiopia, and I'm currently working, as I said, on Dominican flies. So I get to spend months out there pre-COVID. So I've been working on flies for a long time, and I find them amazing. But I realise that there's not as many people loving the flies and understanding why we should love the flies as I feel there ought to be. So first up, what is a fly? Now, many things are called flies. This is why common names are slightly irritating, because a lot of them you have dragonflies and mayflies and scorpion flies, and these aren't true flies. Flies are one of the orders of insects found all over the world and found on every continent and further, but I'll go into that in a bit. And what makes a fly a fly in comparison to the other insects is that as an adult, they've got suctorial mouthparts. So when they talk about flies biting you and you've been bitten by that mosquito, you've never been bitten by a fly. You may have been sliced and pierced and stabbed and maimed, but you won't be bitten. They also have one pair of wings, and hence their scientific name Diptera, which is 2 wings. So these are the only, well, they're not the only insect with 2 pairs of wings, but they're the most dominant order with that. And also, if you can see on this little crane fly here, they have 1 pair of halters, and these are their balancing organs. These truly make flies some of the best aeronautical masters there are. They are amazing. They can loop the loop, fly backwards, invert themselves, land upside down. These little things are absolutely incredible flyers. Now, I've told you that what makes a fly, but actually, flies often have taken the blueprint of what they're supposed to do and ripped it up. So there's many flies that don't have mouth parts as adults, don't have wings as adults, and don't have halters as adults, just to play with your head. But that's what makes them fun. And flies, like a lot of insects, go through a complete metamorphosis. So they will go through different stages in their life cycle. Now this, along with, can you see? Have I got rid of the, there we go. This makes them really quite impressive because unlike other insects, say bees, which do go also through a complete metamorphosis, with flies, in most of the cases, the larval stage is doing nothing with the adult stage. So it's completely separate, and often not only is the habitat separate, but what it feeds on is separate. And this truly helps explain the ecological diversity of this group. Baby bees, they're just lying around getting fed on exactly the same food basically as their siblings, their older siblings. Whereas baby maggots, for example, are often doing something completely different. Look at these little cuties. Yep, I'm looking at some maggots. You're looking at some maggots of some cranefly larvae, some tipulids, and these are great. But you're actually not looking at the heads of the maggots, you're looking at their bottoms. Because again, they have done amazing things with the diversification. Now, because the larval stage is often the most important stage for feeding, they don't want to confuse it and conflate the issue by doing other things such as breathing from their mouths. Oh no, not these clever little things. So they breathe out of their bottoms. What you're looking at, those cute little eyes, are in fact anal spiracles. How brilliant! They've got these amazing little faces, which actually is not smiles, it's something completely different. But these are found in vast numbers in your soil. In fact, there's vast numbers of larvae and fly everywhere. They are some of the most species-rich groups. There are more species of fly found in the UK than there are described mammals on the planet. There is approximately 17 million flies to one of you, so there's a lot of them, and they are incredibly morphologically diverse and are one of the 4 megadiverse orders of insect and therefore megadiverse order of animal on the planet. There's about 165,000 described so far, and we're still going. And because of their numbers and because of their richness and because of their strange morphology, they basically get their little tarsi into every ecological niche out. So they're decomposers, predators, parasites, parasitoids, herbivores, sanguivores, and most importantly, because of tonight, pollinators. And we don't give them enough credit as them being pollinators. But I'm going to go through all the other little things first before we get on to the pollinators. Now, everyone thinks about flies as just hanging around feces. I know, dead bodies and feces is what a lot of flies are for. But you know what? That's actually quite important because we can use them for all sorts of different things. I know it's dinner time, but you have to remember when you're talking to a fly person, we don't really have any sensitivities. So as well as maggots being important in your natural environments of getting rid of corpses, be it vegetation, be it trees, be it animals, etc., they're also very good for us. And on the NHS, you can get maggot debridement therapy, where they can eat away at your necrotic flesh and clear up your wound brilliantly. So these little decomposers are actually very important. Here's one hopefully you're going to come across more often than you have to with those previous maggots. This is a rat-tail maggot. Who does not like a rat-tail maggot? Again, look at its siphon. Yes, that is a telescopic anal spiracle. So it is able to get in the most disgustingly dank and miserable environments and consume all of that rich organic waste and convert it back into other nutrients. Really, really important nutrient recyclers in our environment. And again, what's brilliant is that larvae then pupates, it metamorphosizes into one of the top pollinators. So truly remarkable creatures. But they're not just good at pollinating. Predators. I love a predator. I mean, who doesn't? Vicious, brilliant, and wonderfully good looking. This is a species you'll come across in Cumbria. It's wonderful robberfly. And what I love about robberflies is they're very, very good predators. So they're biological control agents going around getting rid of a lot of stuff that you don't like in your gardens. And what's really fun about them is they're venomous. So we don't think about flies being venomous, but these have got new venoms known to science. So they've got at least 30, of which 10 are utterly unique. and brilliant little predators. And look, even the females have moustaches, which you've got to like. Some of the other predators are quite funky. Some of them are very beautifully adorned. This is a female on the left. She's got wonderfully hairy legs because flies like nothing better than flirting. And this fly, this is a hilarious species of dance flies. These are really good predators. And this one was taken from Cumbria. And you can see it's got expanded front legs. And that's where it has silk glands. Because these are gift givers. The males will go out and catch gifts for the females and wrap them up in silk to give to the ladies. So there's a lot of cute flirting going on with flies. But you've also got some incredibly rare predators in Cumbria. Look at this. That's the one sighting. I love it in the UK. So again, this is an extraordinarily unique predator. You've got some unique habitats. All of these new things that we're turning up. It's really important we go out there. This fly, again, it's one of the dance flies, and it dances around on legs. It's got a very large proboscis you can't see because basically its head is a lot of eyes. And they have some amazing senses, flies, to be able to determine these things, to be able to look for their predators. But as I said, they're not just in for killing, they're definitely in for flirting. Sadly, this is not a UK species, but just to show you some of the crazy way they've adapted their morphology. So these eyes are on the end of stalks. And bless them, this is a male, he leks like deer. So he would go up and they would have fights and they would check each other out dependent on how long their eye stalks are. So they have this, everything they've done, it seems to be like 1 minute is for a serious ecological function and then it's back to flirting again. It's always flirting. Here you go, here's two flies in the act of successfully flirting. And again, this is a group of flies, a family of flies called canopids, and these are parasites. They're parasitoids that you will find in the UK. They're called pedunculids. And the female below has extraordinary eyes. You see them? I mean, the whole head, we call them big-eyed flies for a reason. Their whole head is all these individual photo units called ommatidia, but she has enlarged ones at the front because she's trying to find tiny bugs in which to lay her larvae in. So she has really acute eyesight. Here's another one, which hopefully one day you'll get in Cumbria. I believe there is some examples of this. And again, big eyes, wonderful things. But this one is not a predator. We've now moved on to, as with the other one, this one is a parasite. And this is the sheep nasal botfly. And again, I appear to be going down the dark side of talking about how amazing flies. We're talking about some slightly squeamish ones. But what is truly fascinating about these is the adults don't feed. So when I talked about the mouth parts, suctorial mouth parts, these basically have vestigial mouth parts. There's nothing left because it is the larvae that does all the consuming. And we at the museum have been very lucky to have a lot of technology to start properly looking at the morphology and understanding what's going on. And we have lots of scanning devices now to look at the internal contents. And this is quite exciting in many ways because we can start doing things, and they've done this with actually bees, looking at the pollen content of the stomach. So you're able to incriminate which pollinators are. But in this family and this fly, we were really curious to see what was happening. And we're able to actually do some real-time scanning within the pupal case to have a look at the guts. So here you go, you've got the third instar larvae. And this is basically, it's a walking, I call them sleeping bags, full of vegetable soup, because that's all they are. Just a walking or a crawling stomach, as it was. And it's happily living up the nose of a sheep and enjoying and munching away. And so it has its enormous gut. And then gradually, when it goes through its metamorphosis in the pupa, it gets rid of this gut. And you can see the adult developing here, till you have this newly emerged adult, and its gut is basically non-existent anymore. And it's amazing that they go through such a complete morphological change, both externally and internally. And these things, although it doesn't sound very nice for the sheep, a lot of these species have co-evolved alongside these animals for a long time. And maybe one of the most endangered animals on the planet is a fly, because it is one that lives in the stomach of a rhinoceros. So when you think about conservation, and a lot of people, they will think about the actual mammal, they will think about the birds, but they pay little credence to actually some of the rarer, stranger, weirder creatures that are found in them. For example, this is a little cutie. It's like a little walking teddy bear. It's a wingless fly, and it's found in the UK. But up to a certain point, we'd successfully wiped it out by mistake on the mainland UK, because this little fly is called a bee rider, and it's there on the back of a bee. You can see it. And when in beehives, when the varroa mite turned up, and we put miticides throughout all the nests everywhere, we didn't really kill the varroa mite, but we wiped out this little species. And that's a little unfair, because this is not a parasite, it's a kleptoparasite. So it feeds on the food round the mouths of the queen. So she's quite messy. Imagine, like, I hate to say this, if any of you have got beards, when your food gets in there, these little flies are going around clearing up her mouth parts, which is rather nice. So it was one of these really sad things where we didn't quite understand all the ecology, we didn't quite understand the impact of what we're doing. Luckily, a few have been turning up, because they were all on the islands around the UK, and finally a few are turning up back in the UK, which is good news, because they're very cute. We got some other things that live on bees, maybe not so cute for the bee. These are bees and wasp grabbers, and these are beautiful canopids, and they look really quite hardcore. They do look like the wasps that they're mimicking, and they're, you know, morphologically quite robust. But the female is amazing, because if you see there on the right, at the end of her abdomen, she basically has a clasping organ, which she just grabs onto the bee or the wasp or wherever she's laying her eggs on, to hold on to it to enable her to do this. And it can be really quick. I've not seen them. They're everywhere at the moment. So go out, you get them all around Cumbria, go out and have a look, because they're quite amazing things. And again, look, they've got beautiful mouth parts, because the adults are nectar and pollen feeders. So it may seem quite nasty what a lot of the larvae get up to, but everything is generally in balance, and we do need all of these to regulate populations. And their adults are also doing great ecological services by pollinating. And that's some of the things when people talk about wiping out species because they don't understand the point of them, such as mosquitoes. I have to defend the mosquito basically every day of my life, because everyone wants to kill them. And I know they can be very problematic. Now, mosquitoes aren't the deadliest animal on the planet. The deadliest animal is like yours truly. But they are important vectors transmitting other things which are the problem. So malaria, the plasmodium, the worms, the nematodes and things like that, they are bad. But interestingly, in studying them and looking at them, we've learned a lot of other things, not just their ecological interactions, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I don't know if you've ever done this, I have. I've studied a mosquito sucking some blood out of me, which has been quite entertaining. But it's very hard for us to determine at the time what we are being fed upon. In fact, we only find out afterwards in a lot of the cases because we have an allergic reaction. And that's because she has the most amazing mouth parts. I do go on about mouth parts because they are fascinating. What she's able to do is she's able to penetrate the skin, and she's then able to flex her mouth parts underneath the skin, because at the very end of them, she has sensors on that can sniff your capillaries. So it's this moving needle. Now, what has been going on at the moment is we've had a global pandemic, and so we've had a massive vaccination program. And I'm sure some of you here will have a phobia against needles. They are not nice. They can be really painful. So what clever people, much cleverer than I have done, have looked at the mosquitoes and figured out how on earth do they manage to penetrate our skin without us knowing. And they've realised it's because their mouth parts are like a pneumatic drill. And in doing so, they vibrate on your skin. They're able to penetrate at a lot less force. In fact, it's something like 400 times less force to enable them to get through. So thanks to this thing we hate, we are now developing smart needles to enable us to have less painful injections. Here's another fly with a massively long proboscis. Look at that. If that was a human, our tongue would be 6 meters long. So it looks really scary. I know, is it another mosquito? No, it's just we call these tangled vein flies, and this tongue has co-evolved alongside a lot of long tube plants. And this is found in the Cape region of South Africa. And if anyone's been there, it's one of the most floristically amazing regions out, because it's taken a long time. These plants and insects have co-evolved with each other over a really long period, and you've got these special adaptations. So what looks like a scary mouth part is actually very important. And this species, if it died out, 8 species of plants would die tomorrow. There's some really important pollinators. One of the long tube flies we get in the UK is probably the most cutest little animal in the UK. I'm not hearing any different. It's Bombilius major, and it's been a really good year for those. And it is our own long tube pollinator. And there's some amazing images I was shown this year by Tim of them expanding their mouth part. So these are able to get into a lot of the long tubed plants that a lot of the bees with their short tongues cannot get in. And these are early, spring arrivals. And so when everyone else is a bit cold, all the other insects are like, oh, I'm not coming out yet. Thanks to their fluffy little coat, they're able to come out a lot earlier in spring and get pollinating. So they're really good. Another amazing pollinator with its mouth parts is the Ringia campestris, and here it's going. And what this one has had its mouth parts folded up in its beak, and so usually they're tucked out of the way, but you can see it's really getting deep down into the plant like this. These are commonly called the Heineken fly because they get into the parts of plants nothing else can reach. You can see that. Now Ringia campestris is one of the many hoverflies in the UK. I mean, there's nearly 300 species of hoverfly in the UK, and they're really important pollinators. We're only truly beginning to really realize how important some of these pollinators are. They, not just the adults, and this again is why the flies are really important, because, so Lepidoptera, brilliant, butterflies and moths, amazing pollinators, larvae, quite destructive. Larvae in flies, yes, ecological warriors, always ignored. So here's a new one. This is a Volacella zonaria. This is our biggest hoverfly, and it obviously causes panic and mayhem with everyone going, oh no, I've been invaded by hornets. Nope, calm down everyone. It's totally harmless and really good. Now this was a very rare vagrant that turned up from southern Europe. It turned up at the turn of the last century, but it was only in the 1940s when it began to properly settle in the UK and around London. And it may be something to do with the urban heat island effect of what was going on. London pollution has to have a benefit somewhere along the line. But we've now been actively recording this species for quite a while, and one of the societies that I thoroughly recommend you looking up is the Diptera Forum. And they have many recording schemes under their belt, including the Hoverfly recording scheme, which is a really superb recording scheme in the UK and is really active with lots of very quick identifications, enabling us to understand stuff. And they have been pivotal in helping us understand climate change and the impacts of increased weather perturbation and things like that when it comes to our hoverfly populations. And I've been studying this, and we can see, look, it's popping up in Cumbria now, so you've got to go and pay attention to it. And these are, the adults are really important pollinators, and they migrate quite large distances. The larvae are scavenger in the nests of wasps, so they really don't do any harm. And they really don't do any sort of biological welfare, unlike some of the true ecological masters. And these are some of the best flyers out. So these are all taken in my garden, but don't worry, they're heading north. In fact, they should all be found up by you. And these are some of the hoverflies that are the migratory hoverflies. We've got Eristalus and the Eupioides, which is on the right. And Eupioides, these can migrate from North Africa. And what is quite exciting about the one with the sausages on its abdomen, as it were, is their larvae are ophidophagus. So their larvae consume huge amounts of aphids. So not only are the adults moving from North Africa and able to pollinate as they go, and so spreading the genetics, spreading the pollen of some often relic populations, so doing a fantastic job. They're not specialists, they're generalists, they don't care, they pollinate everything. But their larvae are consuming, I think it's something like 400 aphids, 400 to 600 aphids before they metamorphosize. Now that is extraordinary, especially when I tell you up to 4 billion flies are found migrating into southern Europe, southern England every year. So that's a huge amount of pollinators, and it's a huge amount of little biological warfare units. Fantastic creatures. Now, it's not always reciprocal. Sometimes plants do some sneaky stuff. Never trust a plant. And some of them will pretend they're a corpse because they know that a lot of flies love a corpse. This is me hoovering flies off Titum arum. I have collected of corpses, and nothing as smelly as this. It was quite the most revolting thing. And what was really upsetting was that there was a big bunch of school children just outside, and I couldn't make a single noise. I just had to go, look, collecting the flies off it. And there's a lot, so these are, a lot of them are brood site deceptive plants. The really huge plants, I love it, are all the ones that are sneaky. That Eupioides, the hoverfly, it gets conned as well because there's some orchids that pretend that they're aphids in distress. And so the hoverfly is like, brilliant. I mean, you go and lay my larvae there, and they'll all be happy because there's loads, and the little orchids and that fooled you, but you've just helped me with pollination. So that's the thing. There's a lot of hoverflies. They're very good, but they are not the only pollinators. In fact, of the number of the described species of fly, we think about half of them, maybe half the families, may contain pollinator groups. And there's a lot of families that we wouldn't think about. So, for example, the cuckoo pint, which is found all over the place, and I've been loving, which is highly toxic, whatever, but its main pollinator is the tiny, tiny midge. Okay, these are owl midges. These are the ones that hang around your compost. These are the ones that hang around your sink, and generally look like they're confused all the time, which I'm not surprised because they're being kidnapped by a lot of these plants. These are really important pollinators. In fact, a lot of the very small species of fly are some of them really, really important pollinators. You wouldn't have chocolate if it wasn't for a biting midge. So when people want to get rid of these nasty midges, then we have to say no, because in doing so, you have no idea what else you might be causing an impact on. For example, mosquito pollination. Everybody hates mosquitoes, as we described, but they're actually really important pollinators. We found this out 100 years ago. Why it took us so long, I have no idea. But many of them are really important pollinators in some of the systems that we wouldn't have a lot of other pollinators. For example, in the Arctic, there are 4,000 described species of insect, of which 2,000 are flies. Now, because they're quite hardy, because they can go through a larval stage and a different, because they can go through periods of dormancy, they're able to survive in a lot of these extreme environments. And some of them are really important pollinators of, say, Arctic plants, such as Arctic orchids and things like that. They're the only pollinators of it. So it's really important that we actually think about when we are creating systems that we're not trying to get rid of a lot of things. My advice with mosquitoes and things like that is create barriers between you and them, but don't necessarily get rid of them, because actually they're quite important. And the thing is, one of the reasons I wrote these books is because I wanted to go on and on about this, the ecological differences that we don't yet know about. One of the great things about flies is that they're still turning up, still new species, and still so much to learn about them. we are seeing new species turning up in the UK all the time, and we still think that the UK is only about 95% described. So you may be describing new species, which is quite fun. And I'm going to recommend this thing by Steve. Steve's an amazing dipterist. You have many amazing dipterists up in Cumbria. But he has said that so far, and this was maybe 2014, so there may be probably a few more on the list, but you have 2,129 species of flies recorded so far in Cumbria. Now, there's many more species in comparison to the 7,000 that are in the rest of the UK. And I don't believe, nor does he, that this is something that this is an accurate representation. In fact, the more accurate representation is probably about 4,000. The most described species of flies in Cumbria are going to be the hoverflies. And as I said, they're quite easy, and you've got some brilliant books to help you. So please go out there, get recording. So thank you everyone for a whistle-top tour through the flies. I probably went far too fast, but I will thoroughly recommend the Dipterist Forum recording schemes. Go out there and find out what's pollinating. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Erica. That was just incredible. I'm just utterly aghast at the amount of information you've managed to impart to us. So cheers to you too. Wow. Flirting flies, smart needled mosquitoes, Heineken fly. Wow, really impressive. So thank you for a really utterly inspiring talk. We will have some questions. So we have a lot of people here tonight. So I'm sure we've captivated a lot of interest and a lot of questions also. What I'll do is I'll hand over to Lucy, who is just collating all the questions. But if any of you do have questions, please put them in the chat box, and we'll go through the chat, and we'll pose questions to Erica.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. It's absolutely amazing. I'm sure you've converted a lot of people to love flies.
Well, the thing about flies is, what I love is that your gardens, I mean, you don't have to go anywhere for flies, they come to you. And I describe your gardens as like a 1980s nightclub. It's just carnage and mayhem, and there's so many interesting things. And the best thing to do with flies is just to leave things. Like, I love it. The untidier your garden, the more little piles of rubbish or rotten logs and things like that, a bucket, all of those sort of things, a falling over tree. This is all excellent habitat for flies. So it's really, really good. Be lazy, benefit the planet.
That sounds good to me.
Good advice. Have we got any questions, anybody? Oh, we've got Cara saying your enthusiasm is infectious, Erica. Love the book too. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite interesting because a lot of people in lockdown have spent more time being able to look, and so what we've been finding really useful is, silly enough, is phones, because nowadays smartphones have got such good cameras on them. You must see this a lot, that we can do a lot more identifications really quickly. Yeah. So we can add records really quickly. So we've generated in the last year an enormous amount of data, because people have had time to actually just sit and stare. Yeah. And one of the things about being small and clumsy is that my childhood was spent sitting and staring because I'd fallen out of a tree or whatever. And you start noticing more and more things. And this is really important for us. And what's really important as well is the host plants, is being able to say that was found there and that was found there. So all of these pictures are really, really useful.
And we've been using, as part of the project, iNaturalist.
I live on it. I love it. It's really good for me for the botany, because I'm not a botanist, and so I can immediately find out what my fly's on. So I absolutely love the app. It's really, really good.
Polly asks, how do you recognize them? So how do you recognize flies?
So a lot of the times people confuse flies with bees. okay? Because when you look at your bush, you will just see yellow and black things, and everyone go, oh, so it's all bees. Well, actually, a lot of them will be flies. And bees kind of fly, like, ooh, like kind of, hello, I'm a bee, and I'm quite nice and gentle. Well, flies have way more purpose. They're like straight in there, and a lot of them will hover, hence their common name. A lot of non-hoverflies hover as well. So bee flies will get in there. They do, and they will sit differently as well. They sit a lot more. So it's like they're kind of observing a lot more. I don't know if they're pondering what to maim next or whatever, but there's a lot more of that. When it comes to the larval stages, they're just everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And if they're a larvae with no legs, they're all legless. I think maybe that's another fun thing about them, is that then it's going to be a fly. So in your ponds, in your buckets, in your tree holes, in your ground, there's a lot of them.
Brilliant, thank you. And Cara asks, what is your favourite fly? That's a good question. Can you choose?
It's like, I'm not a mother, but I'm sure this is what you feel like. Which is your favourite child? So I've got a soft spot for the robber flies, obviously, because who hasn't got a soft spot for predators? And there's one up in Cumbria, not Cumbria, in the Cairngorms, sorry, the Lafria flava, which is just, it's a beautiful robber fly, and it does very much look like a bumblebee, but it's just a brilliant looking thing. And then the bee flies, because you know, and the fun thing about the bee fly is that you've got these beautiful adults and they look amazing, but you've also got, they're called a bee fly for a reason. The larvae are a bit naughty, and she's quite fun because she has a bum bag which she keeps sand in. So she twerks, she kind of hoovers up. You can watch them doing this. She's kind of like this donut shape, comes down, and she hoovers up sand into her bottom, as all good females do. And then she will coat the eggs in the sand, which will act as it stops them desiccating. It's a little bit of ballast, you know, it's a really good thing. And then she fires them out. She's a brilliant mum. And these eggs go everywhere, and the larvae hatch. And the larvae to start with are pretty much like your toddlers, because they're fast, which is quite a thing to say for a legless creature. And they have got like a false leg, so they do kind of like run, and they're trying to get into the nests of solitary bees. So a lot of people are like, oh no, that's really bad, but they have done ecological impact assessments, as it were, and realize that they don't have any real detrimental effect on bee populations. So it's fine, it's just nature. But the second stage, when they've got into the little bee nest, they eat all the bees' food, pretty bad anyway, and then they metamorphosize into basically a teenager. So they become this big, lazy thing that just wants to eat food and not go out, and it attaches to the bee grub and either eats its insides or outside in. So it's quite bad. But then it metamorphosizes into a really cute little fly.
Oh, I like the different stages. Oh, got one from Polly. But if there are so many, how to identify different ones? I have a very untidy forest garden in Derbyshire. I must have hundreds of kinds I've never even seen.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, once you start looking, you realize that there are. And I would recommend you start with gateway flies, as we call them, because once you start on those, it's easy to go to the other ones. The hoverflies are really good because, where's my books? I've got, there's really good wild guide keys to hoverflies, really nice. And a lot of them you can do by pictures. And then the soldier flies, again, you've got a really nice books. So that's a range of families, and these are quite big and chunky flies, so they're quite easy. So start on those, and then if you take others, just go on Twitter or go on Facebook and things like that and say, help, join the Diptera forum. There's a lot of obsessed people like me out there ready to help you.
Oh, I love your passion. And then S. Gaskell asks, what's the lifespan of a housefly?
Depends. Okay, so the majority of time, maybe a month. It really does depend. So you've got the egg stage, and that can be prolonged. Depends on what they are. So it could be a dormant phase. The larvae can be quite quick, depending on temperature. Great time at the moment. And then the adults, maybe a couple of weeks, month. So, but the housefly is also a really important pollinator, and we're now trying pollinator studies using it. So just shoo it outside if it's inside and just say, look, go out there and pollinate. The thing is, why it's always with us is we're exceptionally smelly. And I'm not making any personal comments about all of you, but generally, a fly has really, really increased sensitivity to smell. And your kitchen and your house is just full of such exciting things for it to smell. And plus, they leave signatures behind. So all their little feet, they taste with their feet. So they'll be tasting all messages from previous insects going, Jeremy, stay here because there's lots of nice food.
So we should be protecting the housefly. We've got another question. Avian flies seem to appear as adults at the entrance to bird boxes, just as the young of great tits and blue tits fledge and are leaving the nest. Is this likely to be synchronized due to temperature? They don't appear to be in the nest boxes until this time.
Right, so avian flies, these are hippobosids, and these are amazing. These are called flat flies for a reason. And these flies are quite extraordinary because these flies give birth to live young. So that's why you've got something very strange going on. So the females, she basically gets pregnant. I mean, there's no other way of phrasing it. And she has internal lactating glands. So she has milk glands on the inside that she nourishes her larvae. And she will only give birth to about 4 in her lifetime, 4 or 5. So she's able to turn up, she's able to fly and figure out what's going on. So this is why you're not going to see, and she will then feast for blood to convert. It's why you won't see the larvae ever. So, and their pupae look like little squash smarties on walls of various things. So if you kind of see this kind of brown disc thing, obviously it's not that big because can you imagine? That would be hilarious. But it's not. But that is why you're not seeing any of the larval development, and she's able to get there. We've just set up a recording scheme for them. So please do start recording them. That would be fantastic.
Oh, I love avian flies now. Oh, have we got another question? Let's have a look.
I have a question actually.
Yeah.
How are flies responding to climate change? Are they adapting quickly, or have we had any measurements for that?
That was the point I was going to make. Now, funny enough, they have not been studying flies as much as other animals. Weirdly, I don't know why. So yes, so climate change, as with all insects, at the moment it's not the biggest driver because habitat change is still the biggest driver, agricultural impacts, pesticides, these sorts of things, but it's definitely coming through. There's been a few dramatic papers talking about Insectageddon, and they have been trying to get through the data and figure out through lots of they've been doing meta-analysis of a lot of other studies, such as the rather famous one in Germany now, looking at malaise samples and abundance of insects, not species richness, but abundance. But specifically looking at flies, very, very rare. The Rothamsted traps, this has been going on for a long time, and they've been looking at some groups of flies, including the St. Mark's flies, and they have found that it has been impacting them. But probably the biggest one that they've been looking at with flies is hoverflies, and this has come out recently looking at the impact of climate change and biodiversity of a lot of our pollinating insects. And again, this is Roger Morris and some of the key Diptera hoverfly people. And most of the flies are negatively impacted, surprise, except for the big migrating ones. So those really key important pollinators are able to deal with this by moving around a lot more. Because their larvae are just vicious predators that eat loads of things. And because the adults are not just on one flower, they're able to adapt and evolve. And I think this is what we're going to see, is that, you know, a lot of species are going to suffer, especially those in very rare habitats. They are not going to like this at all. But then there's going to be some generalists who are absolutely going to love it. And that's not necessarily a good thing, though.
I guess only time will tell, won't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Another question, one from Polly this time. I was thinking that all our tip boxes failed this year. Are there flies that will be affected by that kind of thing?
Yeah. The tips, they came, what was it? It was a problem because they didn't get the insect emergence at the right time.
Yeah.
So actually, it was because there wasn't the insects around. It wasn't the flies everywhere that you're going to start seeing this. And this is a problem. I mean, again, with flies, they're hugely important in the diet of a lot of birds. So have you heard of a midgenado? Everyone's talking about, because Chris Packham did it the other day. Okay, so you get massive aerial emergences from lakes and things like that. So they look like these murmurations of little flies. But because this year has been weird, and because the weather has impacted on that, a lot of the flies are just not emerging. It's been, they are keeping, you know, they're waiting for the environmental cues to be correct. And they can adapt faster than the birds. And the poor birds are all suffering because of this. And we're going to start to see this more and more. The mammals, the birds, the fish, they're all going to be dramatically impacted because of changes in the insects. And we have to remember this. We got to save the planet as a whole. We got to save the really little things, because they are the important bits. We are just the icing, and a really quite bad icing at times. So this is what's the problem with that.
Thank you, Erica. Someone suggested that there's an app called Seek that would help ID of some flies. You've heard of it, maybe? I've not heard.
I haven't heard of it.
No.
I'm going to get sidetracked. Don't let me look it up now.
Has anyone else got any more questions? Looks like we're coming to an end of questions. Oh.
We have got one final question.
Got one final one. I've always noticed that flies fly around the lampshade in the middle of the room, usually in a square direction.
Why?
Yes,
because they're trying to fool birds. I know, obviously, you don't have birds in your living room. I don't know what you lot do, actually, but I'm assuming you don't have many birds flying around. But a bird can't change its angle that quickly, whereas a fly can. The neurological pathway of flies is really quite funky. I won't get too technical, but I go into it in the inside out of flies, because their processing speed is phenomenal. Now, remember those pictures of all the eye facets, those photo units on a fly's head? Now, in most insects, there's just one photo tube going all the way down, and they have one image. So they make up with this by having, say, maybe lots. So dragonflies got 36,000. Now, the most we know so far in flies is about 7,000, but that photo tube has been split into 7 different units. So they can see a lot more because they've got all these different angles. So they have this super processing unit that goes to the neurological, because they have a brain. It's a simple version of ours, slightly more efficient, I would say, and sometimes. But they also can transmit messages directly to the wings. So it's almost like they can bypass any thought, and it's instinctive. So when you go to hit a fly, which obviously none of you are doing unless it's in the name of science, is they see you as slow motion, because they're able to process that movement so fast that they're like, just get out of the way. And so this is when they're flying around and birds are like, oh, look, brilliant. And the fly just goes, nah, just quickly turns on an angle so sharp. Now, why they're hanging around your lampshade is because your lampshade has thousands of little footprints on it. and it is a nice, obvious lure in the middle of your room. This is the whole thing about if you're a bald man rowing on a lake, you're going to get a load of flies over your head because of the reflective properties of your head and the lake combined to make you a very obvious sight for the males and females flies to flirt around your head. Same. A lot of flirting in your living room.
Brilliant. So just a few information things. Mandy said Seek is an app for my naturalist. With Seek, you can use your smartphone and hold the camera viewer over the object and it will identify the object. Okay, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, may not be that accurate sometimes though.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yes,
that's
yeah,
right.
I'd err on the side of caution.
Yeah. Someone asked, will there be a recording? Yep, this talk's been recorded and we'll send it to everyone in an email, which should get to you either probably tomorrow, and we'll upload it to our website as well. So yeah, people will be able to rewatch you, Erica.
Sorry, I do get excited and probably talk far too fast. But you talk about flies and it's just a nightmare.
Don't say sorry, it's absolutely fascinating. Thank you. I think that's the end of the questions. Don't think anyone's got any more. So all's left to say thank you, Erica. It's been absolutely fascinating. And I think people are saying it in the chat as well. So yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, so on behalf of Cumbria Wildlife Trust, a huge thank you for being here tonight and sharing your incredible insight and your amazing knowledge of flies. I mean, after that, who can't love flies? You know, and important message there is the small things that matter as well. And I just to say as well is that you have been truly inspirational, and we have first hand account of that. I spoke about Melanie, who is she was our apprentice at Cumbria Wildlife Trust, and because of you and other like-minded entomologists who really rave and enthuse others about insects, she's gone on to do an MSc in entomology as a result. And so it's a huge round of applause to you for inspiring others and provided a absolutely fascinating talk this evening. I'd like to thank the audience too for joining us tonight, and I hope that everyone here has enjoyed Erica's talk as much as I have and Lucy has, and we'll be sending out an email to everyone that will contain the link to Erica's talk tonight, and this will also include a short survey, which is an evaluation questionnaire just to find out what your thoughts are about the talk tonight, its importance, and about also the different species of pollinators, and you'll be able to add flies to the list now. So yes, on behalf of everyone at Cumbria Wildlife Trust and Get Cumbria Buzzing, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Bye-bye now.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.